Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's Perry, also known as Books Aren't Boring. And if you're new to my channel, here I do like reviews and synopsises of books that you generally find in like the high school curriculum. Today we are doing 1984, which technically I said at the beginning of the year that I would do it, but I waited a really long time and I've had this book from the library for like a month now and I finally decided to do it, so here we are. Okay, so I'll try to give like a brief idea of what the book is about. So essentially, the main character and like all the people around him live in this world called Oceania. It's basically like Australia and New Zealand's like official combined continent name, but they don't live in Australia. Don't confuse the two. And they have like East Asia and Eurasia, and they're always at war with either one of them. But like basically, the government is just convincing everyone that they're at war with one or the other at any point in time. Now, the main character's job is to change all of the news articles to reflect who the government wants them to currently be mad at. So, for example, like halfway through the book, it changes from Eurasia to East Asia, and Winston, that's his name, has to go through and fix everything and then redirect everyone's anger. So now we'll get into more of like the deep of the plot. So every day they get woken up by this thing that's basically like a television, but they can't turn it off because the government is watching them. It's called a telescreen. And basically they get like forced to wake up at a certain time every day, and then every couple days they have to do like this exercise routine. As you know, like if you vaguely come into contact with 1984, you will know the Big Brother is watching thing. That's real. And then Winston works in the Ministry of Truth because he is the one changing everything to reflect the government's views on stuff. So basically, there's the Ministry of Truth, the Ministry of Plenty, the Ministry of Peace, and the Ministry of Love. And all of those, what they do inside of those ministries is like the opposite of what their name is. So like Ministry of Love, it's like torture and hatred. Ministry of Truth, well, he's fabricating lies to tell the people. So you will notice that the book, like the society that the book is around, kind of thrives off these contradictions. They have the war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength motto, and that's kind of like the general, oh, we're telling you that everything we're doing is right when in actuality everything is wrong. The main other people you see in the book are this guy named like Syme and O'Brien. There's also another guy. His name is Mr. Parsons. His kids are like thought police little children. Also, every single day they have something called the 2 minutes hate, which is like the way of them being like, you can release your anger towards whoever we hate at the moment, because basically the government thrives off the anger and ignorance of the people who live there. And then there's also the proles, who are like kind of the people who still abide by the laws, but they're slightly different. They're more rowdy. They're less obedient, so they stay in their separate sector. So anyway, Winston going to work and all that, and then he goes to the cafeteria. They're talking about like how there's more chocolate, when actuality Winston's like, well, I think there's actually less chocolate, and that's like a thought crime or something. Double think, because he's thinking two things. He knows one thing but thinks the other, that kind of thing. And then he sees this girl. Her name is Julia. I don't think her name is introduced at first, but her name is Julia, and she has dark hair, and that's like her defining feature. While he's in the cafeteria, Syme is also there, and he goes into this whole thing about how they're making the new newspeak language, which is basically they're going to whittle down the language until people can no longer express the bad feelings they're having, because if there's no words to express the badness, then nobody can go against the rules of society. We live in a society. Winston, throughout the book, starts like, you see his gradual descent into being like, the revolution is here, we are the people kind of thing. But then at the end of the book, you sort of discover like, there really is no hope, because there's so much power in like the government. But Winston at first is like, the proles have all the power for the revolution. We just need to get them together. We need to uprise. And he trusts O'Brien. He shouldn't, because O'Brien is literally like an operative in one of the torture chambers. He's an operative in the Ministry of Love, but basically he convinces Winston that he's trustworthy so that he can get his secrets and then destroy him. Back to the other part, what's really important is that like him and Julia start like a romance thing, and then they move into like above this man Mr. Charrington's shop. They move into a room and they think that there's no telescreens in there, which is not possible because of like the society they live in. Later they'll be like, we are the dead, and then the telescreen is like, you are the dead, and then people start coming in and they just smash down the wall basically. And they were fooled. They were fooled the whole time. The telescreen was hidden behind like a picture. They were never really safe, all that. And then at the end, Winston basically rats out Julia because Julia ratted him out, which is ratted him out, kind of a funny term considering that Winston's torture in the chamber was rats. But then they kind of acknowledge that they hurt each other and then no longer talk, and Winston's just like a happy party member now. I feel like there is some kind of discussion there about whether or not this is a happy ending, because technically for Winston it is a happy ending. He gets to live ignorant for the rest of his life because he was brainwashed by the party, but the other side is that it's not a happy ending for literally anyone because their horrible society is still the way it is. So reading this book, I saw why we shouldn't have read it in freshman year, not only because there were like things in there that, you know, we just shouldn't have read, but also there's a lot of like political stuff that would have made more sense if we were older. As we read 1984 and Brave New World, I liked Brave New World better. Might do a review on that just because I think that the concept of it was cool, even though it's completely satire. But there's also some parts of it, like there's entire chapters that are just dedicated to that one book by Emmanuel Goldstein, like the Revolution book that explains all of the like class issues and power that Big Brother has over everyone. And like Winston just straight up reads like chapters and chapters of it. So it's like part of the book is the chapters of that book. And when I first read the book, like freshman year, I didn't read any of that. I skipped it and then just like read online about what it meant because I didn't care. But now I see why that part is actually really important, and we should have been given like more time to learn it, or at least just given like an extra year. Like probably sophomore year would have been fine, even though my teacher says that we shouldn't have read it until our senior year. But I feel like knowing 1984 now is probably fine. Oh yeah, I'm gonna touch on the whole unperson thing. So basically, if you commit actual whole party crimes, not even like big ones, just like for example, believe it was Syme, accidentally like left the word God in one of his things that he was translating, and then he straight up disappeared. And if you disappear, you have to disappear from all records, meaning that everyone has to go back and erase your existence. And even if they knew you existed, they can't say anything about it. And that becomes a problem when people start keeping like their own records of things like diaries, which is why Winston has his own diary, but actually everyone knows about it. It's kind of weird because O'Brien mentions it in like the third part of the book where he was like, ever since you started writing in that diary, we knew. And he was like, he thought he was safe from the telescreen. Turns out he wasn't. And he wrote in that book like, I hate the party or something, or I hate Big Brother. Not a smart move considering you live in an all-knowing society. And there's also parts of the book where Winston's just like, I remember my past. His past kind of sucked. Oh, and he has a wife, but he doesn't like her. And he's also like an ex-wife, but you can't remarry unless they die. But he considered pushing her off the cliff, but then he was like, well, actually, life wouldn't be any better anyway. I still live in the most horrible timeline to ever exist, so I have that going for me. The entire third part of the book, like this much of the book, it feels like a fever dream. So the entire thing is just Winston being tortured, having his mind completely destroyed by O'Brien, who eventually he's like, he's my savior, but he's really not. So the Brotherhood, like, isn't really real. O'Brien, I think, makes up the the Brotherhood isn't. The Brotherhood is never really made clear as to whether it exists or not. Like, at one Winston says, like, is the Brotherhood real? And O'Brien's just kind of like, that's up for you to decide. Like, he doesn't actually say. O'Brien's main purpose of perpetuating the idea of the Brotherhood is just to betray Winston. But in the third part, Winston is like, well, I'm not going to let them do anything to me. I still hate the party. By the end, it's clear that that didn't really work because their brainwashing skills are like beyond this world. But O'Brien just like trains him to be like, if I hold up 5 fingers, this is 4, this is 4. And Winston is like, I'll just tell him that it's 4 so that he's happy. And then he starts like kind of believing all this stuff. He's like, I will obey the party. I will obey Big Brother. But O'Brien's like, well, you gotta love Big Brother too. And then tortures him some more. Winston screams a lot. There's a lot of screaming. My school did like a production of 1984. There's just a lot of screaming, a lot of turmoil. The cells, this is kind of important, the cells are like the place where there is no darkness. And O'Brien mentions that. People mention that a couple times throughout the book, and it turns out it's actually the Ministry of Love cells because there are constant like fluorescent ugly lights in there. So Winston starts going insane. He like screams Julia's name. He like hopes that there's like blades so he can just kill himself because he doesn't want to live in this world anymore. After being like, well, I want Julia to get eaten by rats, then he's set free, and suddenly it cuts to like the end of the book. After the torture, he's like, I love Big Brother. Julia can get hurt instead of me. And then it cuts to him being like at the table at the cafe, just sipping stuff. He hears like the television going on, he hears all that. And then he keeps thinking he has like false memories, and because of his brainwashing, he's like, ah, yes, these are false. They are not real. The party is the only thing that has ever existed, ever. So even though the reader can see like what's wrong with the picture, he obviously doesn't. And at the end, it's like he won the battle against himself. He loves Big Brother, which you can see how that's not really a happy ending, because internally he sees the problem, but because he was completely brainwashed, so he no longer sees the problem. I feel like by the end of the... Sorry, this was so scattered. I'm like thinking of so many things at once and like remembering so much. By the end of the book, I feel like it'll start a pattern. Like, the Winstons of this world will never disappear. It just will keep going and going. I'm hoping you can see why this book is interesting just from like hearing about it, because there's like so much, but also actually reading the book can be kind of an uninteresting experience. So you have to look past like all of the extra words, all of the chapters about Emmanuel Goldstein's freaking book, and just like understand the concept of the book that Goldstein, we don't know if he's real, that Goldstein wrote, and like what Winston is reading. I don't have that much else to say other than the book is really good and you should read it. You'll find a lot of references to it in media, so it's important that you like understand what it means. In summary, the Brotherhood does not, but also does exist. O'Brien is a murderous traitor. Everything is not what it seems. And Winston is a revolution-crazed idiot. Yes, Winston is important to the story, but he's also really dumb in everything that he does, because he's so reckless and going insane throughout the story, because he's like, we can take down the party. You can't take down the party. He could have thought of so many other ways to do it, but instead he decided to trust people. In this society, like Mr. Charrington, come on. He's literally a member of the thought police. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you want to see more content like this, please subscribe. Have a nice day. Bye.